to you, and I wanted to thank you all for being here as well. Could I just start by acknowledging that we're on the unceded land of the Awabakal and Worimi people, and I want to pay my respects to any Aboriginal people that are here today, and to elders past, present and emerging. As everybody knows, today is the International Day for the Elimination of Poverty, and we feel like there's other people right across the country that are activating and organising today to draw attention to the woeful situation in welfare reform and the inadequacy of addressing that issue in this country since the change of government and beyond. Critical time is right now because we are awaiting the handing down of a budget next week. When we know from that budget that, and every day we're reminded by the Treasurer that we're entering a period of increasing economic instability and insecurity, which is precisely the time, of course, that we should be looking at welfare reform and making sure that the people who are most vulnerable to that economic security are looked after the most. Instead, we're told, and we will be told every day between now and next week, that now's not the time for welfare reform. You can expect cost of living relief. That's the way that it's been phrased. And we know, and you can read about it up here behind us, that the experience of that will be a continuation of a welfare system which forces people into conditions below the poverty line and doesn't address the structural inequalities and the structural complexities of looking after the people in our society that are most vulnerable. So thank you all for being here. I'm so privileged to be amongst you. Without any further ado, I'd like to pass over to Catherine, who's I've already taken up too much of your time, but just to invite you to share your experiences and I'll leave it to you.
Hello everyone, my name's Catherine and I am no one in particular, which is actually really good news because here we all are on International Day to eradicate poverty, and there's still 364 days a year in which we need to, or would like to really take action to make this happen, and most of us are not a councillor or a senator, so how do we do that? And I've been doing that for the last while, and so since I am no one in particular with quite limited resources, I figure the lessons that I've learned on that are probably applicable to more people than me. So this story is around me, but it's not really about me. And it starts a little while ago. After 2.5 years of fighting, my application for the disability support pension was finally approved. And I felt a wave of relief so intense it was debilitating. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be okay. Because up until that point, like a lot of disabled people, I had been on Job Seeker, and life on Job Seeker was not okay. So I spent a little while, buying a new pillow and getting my car serviced and crazy luxuries like that, and just getting used to living and not just surviving. And then the federal election happened, and I felt that same wave of relief again at not having a government in power who seemed uncomfortably comfortable with me not being alive. So I had that wave of relief, and combined with it was a certain amount of hope. And it was hope, if I'm really honest, not that the new government would come in and right every injustice and do everything amazingly, but it was at least hope that they could be bullied into doing the right thing. So that feeling of hope and that relief combined from I'm going to be okay to I want us all to be okay. And that wasn't a new thought by any stretch of the imagination, but suddenly I had the possibility of change. And thanks to, the DSP, I had a few resources. Like I had enough brain and enough bandwidth to be able to do something. But what? I'm in bed up to 16 hours a day. I'm mostly housebound. I think we can safely say that activity is not my strong suit. So I had to do some research and some thinking about what is it that I can do to contribute to making sure that we're all okay, making sure that no one lives in poverty. And eventually I realized I have subsidized stamps, and in a decent way with words, I'm going to start writing letters. I suppose on the day I decided that, I decided that I was going to keep doing that until welfare rates were raised for as long as it took. I guess on that day I became an activist, though I certainly did not think of myself that way. So I started. 1 letter a week, alternating between the Minister for Social Services and my local MP, or my federal MP. I just started writing letters. Now the actual politician can tell you that a handwritten letter is something that gets some attention paid to it. I've had, people writing back to me, even if it is the form letter that just says thank you for your input. And I strongly recommend everyone who's listening do that at least once if you possibly can. It's very helpful. But I do not recommend that you do it every week unless you really like writing letters and you really find that easy. Because we're 5 or so months since the election, and I am already very aware of how much of a slog I have signed myself up for. So that's the first lesson I've learned. If you're going to take action, make it easy, make it something that you can sustain. Something that's easy for you, something that you can keep going. The second lesson I learned was when I started telling people what I was doing. First because, people would just ask what I was up to, and then I've now reached the point where I will literally tell anyone who stands still long enough. And I've confirmed something that I thought for a long time, which is the vast majority of Australians have no idea how low welfare rates are. And when they find out, they are not okay with it. And that is amazingly good news for us. Because we can't convince our foes, and we don't need to convince our allies, but there's this huge silent majority in the middle that we can activate, that we can reach out to, and we can convince, firstly, to take action, and secondly, to be part of the change in opinion, in the polling numbers, in the just societal opinion toward changing welfare. And the more we get those people on side, the easier it's going to be. So talk about welfare rates. Talk to your friends, talk to your footy team, talk to your physio. Tell them it hasn't been raised in 20 years. Tell them it's 50% of the poverty line. And ask them, how would you survive on $300 a week? And then if they are appalled, which they should be, ask them to take a small concrete action. It doesn't need to be writing a letter, but all the cool kids are doing it, so, But get them to do something. Even if they don't, if you've changed their mind, progress has been made. So that's the second thing I've learned. And the third thing I've learned is we don't need to be as big as the problem we are trying to solve. I am fully aware that every time I send a letter, it is at most a single grain on the scales of justice, but that we can't let that stop us. We have to keep going. We have to keep reaching out. We have to keep taking sustainable action. And then eventually, the grains of sand will number up enough, and the scales will tip, and the world will be better. That's it.
Can I say something?
Yes.
People on pension, why can't we just pay? Like, you're on a pension, right?
Yeah.
Why go to Coles or Woolworths or someone to get medication? Why can't we just pay? I've had occasions where, but why can't we just pay a certain, a restricted amount compared to a multi-billionaire? That's what I want to say.
Can I now invite Senator Faruqi, probably not a stranger to you or many of you. She's joined us here today, and that.
Thanks, John. And thank you, Catherine, for being that cool kid who does write letters. I can tell you as a politician, it definitely does make a difference. And thank you also for your actions and for your activism, because that's the only thing that's going to change the world. But before I say any more, I'd like to acknowledge the sovereign owners of the lands that we gathered on and pay my respects to elders past and present. No matter where we are in this country, we are on stolen land. Sovereignty was never ceded. This is, always was, and always will be Aboriginal land. And I am committed to working alongside First Nations people in their struggle for justice and in their struggle for self-determination. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, for being together, to actually shine a light on the scale, on the depth and breadth of poverty in this country. We are protesting today to break the poverty machine. I think it is absolutely shameful that in a country as wealthy as Australia, millions of people are suffering and struggling in poverty. We know 1 in 8 adults live in poverty, 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. And these are I mean, these are not just numbers or statistics. These are real people living in our communities, in our towns, in our cities, in our streets. They are our friends and they are our neighbors. And this is completely unacceptable. It is also absolutely obscene that millionaires in this country get away without paying any tax, while other people, have to choose between putting food on their table or medical care. They have to choose between heating their house in the dead of winter or perhaps buying school uniform for their kids. They have to choose between going to the dentist or putting food on the table. But here we are, and we are here because we have a government at this point in time who thinks it is more important to give $244 billion in tax cuts, which will flow to the ultra wealthy and the billionaires, rather than investing in supporting people who are struggling, especially who are being crushed, even crushed more under this cost of living crisis. And that is absolutely and totally shameful, and it is unconscionable to do that. But you know what? Poverty is not inevitable. Poverty is not written in the stars. Poverty is a choice that governments make. It is a political choice that governments make. We all remember, it wasn't that far long ago during COVID, when the government did make a choice, literally overnight, to support people. You know, people were, the job seeker rate was raised to a livable income. There were wage subsidies provided to those who couldn't go to work. There were bans on evictions. Childcare was made free. And poverty, there was such a huge difference in the level of poverty in this country at that time. But then governments, as they make some positive changes, they also make decisions to reverse those changes. And that is exactly what happened soon after that. What we need to do now is to make sure that a different political decision is made. The decision for people to be living in poverty is because we have a completely broken, harsh, punitive system that keeps that poverty machine going. And we have to change that. It is way beyond time that we change that. So it is time now to make sure that everyone on income support, that income support for everyone is raised by at least $88 a day. We need to provide a guaranteed livable income for people in this country. We need to abolish all these restrictive and punitive things like mutual obligations. We have to make sure that they are gone forever. We have to build 1 million public, affordable and accessible homes so everyone has a roof over their head. We want to make childcare free. And it is time, it is absolutely time to scrap these obscene $244 billion of stage 3 tax cuts and invest in universal services that everyone needs. That's what the Greens are fighting for. And you know what? Change is absolutely possible. Just in the last few weeks, on the back of community campaigning over years, we saw that the cashless debit card was abolished. That was because of activists like you who pushed hard, for governments to be able to do that. And we have to keep that pressure up. We have to keep that pressure up. So once and for all, this deeply cruel and deeply troubling and deeply brutal social services system is changed over to one that actually provides support for people to live a good life. Thank you so much, everyone.
Can people just join me in thanking these two wonderful speakers for the very honest and very open contributions today. I just wanted to conclude by saying a few words, and it would only just to build on what we've already heard. And I think I want to say the quiet part out loud, actually, and I want to say that the welfare system in Australia is working precisely as it was intended. It is working exactly as it has been designed. Because the design of the system, purposefully, is to be so arduous, so complicated, so punitive, so humiliating and so punishing to actively discourage people from seeking support and assistance at the time when they need it the most. That's what it's intended to do. And that's because the way that it's measured, the performance of that system is measured, is not in terms of how much better are we making people's lives or what kind of opportunities are opening up to people that are on support payments. It's measured in terms of how many people are accessing these payments and how do we bring those numbers down. And that's been the model for decades. And that is the brutal underlying logic, the shameful logic that sits underneath our welfare system. And you can see it in all of the things that this day is calling for. You can see it in the way that mutual obligations are enacted, where people are forced to undertake often humiliating activities, scavenger hunt this, fake CV that, not intended to provide people with the skills or abilities to expand their opportunities, but intended to provide them with an experience that will take them off the books, make the experience of accessing those support payments just utterly unavailable to people. We see it in the ways in which the complicated and the confusing and the limitations and the you're very important to us, you're 15 minutes, we'll answer your call, you're number 26 in the queue, the forms, the invasive questions that get asked of you in order to access these payments when they should be universally available. That's not about making sure your life is better, that's about making sure you're taken off the books. And we see it fundamentally in the rate, which is below the poverty line. Doesn't even give people the dignity of being in poverty, right? You cannot, it is impossible to live a healthy life on the current rate of income support. You can't do it. For reasons that are listed up here, but for reasons that we know. The trade-offs, the kind of housing that you have access to, the kind of medical opportunities that you forgo, it'll come good on its own, I'll be right this week. Eating healthily, all of these things diminish your ability to live a healthy life. Now that, as Mehreen made perfectly clear, this is a political choice. And we've got a budget coming down next week. And we've heard from a treasurer that there won't be any welfare reform. Instead there will be, and I'm quoting this directly, cost of living relief. Well below anything that addresses these issues and well below the kind of reform that's necessary to have a humane and compassionate welfare system and income support system in this country. I expected more from a leader in this country who is well known and makes no secret about being raised in a single parent household and being raised in social housing. I expected at the very least these very reasonable requests that we have put forward today as part of this rally to be on the table and addressed in this budget and going forward over the new government. That's what a compassionate Australia would do. That's what a caring society would do, and that's what we should do as a wealthy country like Australia should be doing. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to tell you that the Greens will never give up this campaign until we have a welfare system that looks after the people in the society that are most vulnerable and most need that support, and does so in a way that doesn't stigmatise, humiliate and shame people of that position, but lifts them up in a way that they can make better opportunities for themselves and be real contributors to society that we all benefit from. Thank you all for being here again. And let's not give up the fight. Yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity. People want to share some